Let me just lay out the facts. Sorry. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time on this. When I first got into Congress, everybody was talking about the unfunded liability, and there are different numbers, 100 trillion or 200 trillion. Well, people don't really understand, the projected outflow and then net present value back into a single. So I came up with the concept of looking at the true definition of the problem. Everything is scored for these budget discussions either over a 5-year or 10-year budget window. But that's not the definition of the problem. The real definition of our fiscal problem is a 30-year demographic problem. All the baby boom generation, we're retiring at the rate of 10,000 people per day. Politicians, elected officials of both parties have made all kinds of promises, and there's literally no way to pay for it. So when you take a look at different projections, we did our own. I was actually one of the Republican senators trying to work with the White House on a kind of a formal basis, trying to find common ground in debt and deficit. So this is kind of what I brought to the table, is that definition of the problem, 30-year deficit. We did our own projection, but CBO has also done long-term projections, and so we cut theirs off at 30 years. They've got two baseline and then an alternate fiscal scenario. So if you stack up those different projections and you compare 30-year spending as a percentage of GDP versus the prior 30-year spending, what you find is even the alternate fiscal scenario, which is the higher estimate, is below historic spending percentages. So I just want, except for entitlements, which is, Social Security is actuarial math. We can do those projections pretty carefully, less so on Medicare. So, long lead into the depressing news. Over the next 30 years, according to CBO's alternate fiscal scenario, again, which you take a look at, it's still less than what we spent over the last 30 years as a percent of GDP. We will accumulate deficits of $127 trillion. We've got an $18 trillion debt now. Over the next 30 years, the first decade is about $8 trillion projected. The second decade, $31 trillion. The third decade, $88 trillion. Now, I use 30 years because that really is the demographic bubble, but also most adults can at least imagine what a 30-year time frame is. Unfortunately, in my case, it went by like that. My little baby just turned 31 and go, whoa, what happened? So this is going to be on us a lot sooner than you think. Now, let me, again, incomprehensible figures, let me put that $127 trillion into perspective. The entire net private asset base of America today, in other words, every asset held by every household, every business large and small, is $106 trillion. Okay? So, if you really analyze it, though, that $127 trillion is made up of basically three things. Social Security over the next 30 years will pay out about $15 trillion more in benefits than takes the payroll tax. So it's got a $15 trillion deficit. Medicare about $35 trillion. So that's about $50 trillion. So we got another 80 to go, right? You know what the other one is? Interest on the debt will be about $71 trillion. I mean, what a waste. What a burden we're putting on our kids and grandkids. And of course, then the 31st year, you'd have 18 trillion plus 100, you'd have $150 trillion worth of debt. I think the interest expense can be pretty high in the 31st year. So it tells us very plainly what do we have to address. We have to address the unsustainable nature of Social Security and Medicare. We've got to first, though, collectively admit we have the problem. We're not there yet. One of the reasons I'm kind of optimistic on border security, the public is way ahead of the political process in border security. They've been demanding us securing the border literally for decades, and everybody's puzzled, why don't you just do it? Well, we'll try. It's not going to be easy, but we'll try. And we've got the advantage of public opinion wanting us to do that. We're not there with Social Security and Medicare. Really all the public wants is we'll just, they're electing people say, I'm going to save your Social Security. Okay, with what? How are you going to do it? And by the way, the fiction of the Social Security Trust Fund, I got to explain that to you too. When you hear politicians say that Social Security is solvency to 2033, it's just misleading. Because they're relying on the trust fund to make up for the deficit spending that's already occurring in Social Security. We're already in deficit with Social Security. We're already paying out more in benefits than we're taking the payroll tax, and now Social Security system is drawing down those trust fund bonds. But here's the problem with the trust fund. It's just a bookkeeping convention. It's U.S. government bonds in the hands of the federal government. It has no value. Same thing as if you had $20 and spent it. That money's spent, it's long gone. And then take out a piece of paper, write $20 on it, stuff it in your pocket, go, I got 20 bucks. No, you got a piece of paper. And in my PowerPoint presentation, I show people the Social Security Trust Fund is a 4-drawer file. It's got locks on it, but it has no financial value. And what's kind of depressing is, I've made this exact point. OMB, Office of Management and Budget, part of every administration, admits it. They talk about it. It's just a bookkeeping convention, that the transaction, the asset to the trust fund minus the liability of the Treasury, it says nets to zero. So I've used that in hearings 7 times. To OMB directors, to Treasury Secretary. Nobody, they wouldn't admit what their own publication says. Only Fed Chair Yellen and Doug Elmendorf, head of CBO, admitted that consolidation of the federal books nets to zero. So again, we just don't have people in Washington that are telling American people the truth. If you're not telling people the truth, you're not going to have the public support to actually fix the problem. So I'm that messenger. Sorry. It's not a politically popular thing to do, trust me. You know, as we found out with just the truth of, you know, the actual results of the war on poverty. It's not a popular thing to do. It gets distorted. You get attacked for doing it. But I got pretty thick skin. So,
Bring it back into it.
Anybody else? Okay.
The reason I'm doing it, I'm checking off.